Hello, everyone. A very warm welcome to our speakers and audience who are following this webinar on our social media channels. My name is Ebu Bekir Işık. I am Research Director of Focal Europe. We are really pleased to host this webinar on Europe's main foreign policy challenges in 2022, and we look very much forward to the discussion today. Thanks to our very diverse panel today, I think we will have the opportunity to make sense of many topics and focus on different matters, as the challenges faced by Europe are of different nature and certainly on multiple fronts. So initially, the panel will address the situation in Ukraine and the most recent developments with Russia. As you know, the significant evolution of the status quo over the past months and weeks also puts into question the credibility of the EU's attitude towards Russia. I think, in other words, while the tensions are high between Moscow and the West, the EU's response to Russia in 2022 will be certainly critical, and we look very much forward to hearing our speakers' thoughts and opinions on the matter. This being said, we would have wanted also really to take a closer look at the relationship between EU and Africa, and particularly the upcoming EU-Africa summit. However, Ms. Soraya Rodriguez, the chair of European Parliament's delegation to Pan-African Parliament, whom we invited for this webinar, has just informed us that she doesn't feel well and therefore she will not be able to join the webinar. This being said, and with a growing presence in Africa, I think China is also a matter of interest for EU policymakers with respect to international liberal order, and it will therefore be, I think, at the epicenter of concerns in the near future, whether it is seen as economic competitor, a negotiating partner, or a systemic rival. Moreover, we will hear our speakers on the topic of push for a stronger Europe, which has been recently again highlighted by Ursula von der Leyen in her State of Union speech. I think many would agree that the need for strategic autonomy and the setting up of the EU's joint defense capability are indeed issues we look very much forward to hearing today from our panel. Last but not least, also our speakers will give us their insights on the refugee issue, whether in Belarus or in Turkey, and present the challenges arising from the situation. Accordingly, we will have the opportunity to discuss how Turkey, under President Erdogan, can notably or cannot contribute to EU's foreign and security policy in its neighborhood and even beyond. This all being said, today's panel will discuss and analyze the topics from diverse perspectives and exchange on the possible EU actions regarding these issues. Thank you very much. Elena, the word is yours.
Thank you, Ebu Bekir. So I'm delighted to host such a diverse and experienced panel today. Thank you all for accepting our invitation. I look very much forward to the discussion. So I am Elena de Rouvroy, and I am a researcher at Vocal Europe. We are glad that this event will be, as Ebu Bekir just said, live streamed on our social media channels, so Facebook, Twitter, and YouTube, and it will be recorded as well, so it remains available after the live. We are thrilled that our Twitter account has reached over 30,000 followers, and we know that our audience has been looking forward to this morning, to this event. If anyone in the audience who is following this webinar should raise some questions or remarks, we will try to let you all of you know during the Q&A at the end of the webinar. So as you probably already know, each of you will initially have the floor for 7 minutes, and then 3 more minutes during the Q&A at the end. So our first speaker today will be Witold Waszczykowski. Please correct me if I say that wrong. Thank you for joining us today. Mr. Waszczykowski is a Polish politician and member of the European Parliament since 2019, where he is notably today the chair of the Parliament's delegation to Ukraine. He was Minister of Foreign Affairs between 2015 and 2018, and member of the Polish Parliament from 2011 to 2019. During his career, he has also been Deputy Chief of Poland's mission to NATO, Ambassador to Iran, and Chief Negotiator with the US on defense missile. Thank you so much for being with us. As Ebu Bekir just said, our second speaker, Maria Soraya Rodriguez Ramos, will not be able to join us today. Our third speaker today is Dick Roach. A warm thank you for joining us. Mr. Roach served as Minister of State for European Affairs in Ireland from 2002 to 2004, and then again from 2007 to 2011. And between these two mandates, he was also Minister for the Environment, Heritage, and Local Government. Mr. Roach is today a consultant in public policy and Vice President of the European Liberal Democrat and Reform Party. Our fourth speaker today is Ambassador Raoul Delcourt. Thank you for making the time to be with us today. Mr. Delcourt has been a member of the Belgian Diplomatic Service since 1986. He was notably posted to the OSCE in Vienna, the UN in New York, Islamabad and Washington, D.C., as well as ambassador to Sweden, Poland, and Canada. He has also been Deputy Director General for Multilateral Affairs and more recently Director for the Middle East North Africa Division at the Ministry of Foreign Affairs in Belgium. He has an extensive teaching and researching background and focuses on EU affairs, multilateral negotiation, and the evolution of Western diplomacy. Ambassador Ümit Yardim is our fifth speaker. Thank you for accepting our invitation this morning. Ambassador Yardim is the Vice President of the Future Party of Turkey and is a former Turkish ambassador to Russia, Austria, and Iran. During his career, he has also served at various levels in Turkish embassies in Pakistan, Greece, Azerbaijan, and Portugal. Ambassador Yardim is also Deputy Undersecretary for Eastern Europe, Asia Pacific, and Africa at the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. So with such a diverse panel, I am sure the following discussion will be thrilling and insightful, and we look forward to listening to our distinguished speakers here at Vocal Europe. I will now give the floor to our first guest today, Mr. Witold Waszczykowski. And if I may, given your extensive experience in dealing with Ukraine-related topics and seeing the most recent developments with Russia, my first question, and to open the floor, would be, do you think a diplomatic solution is still achievable? Thank you.
Thank you. I'm connected from Brussels, so here in Brussels is before noon, so I will greet you just by saying good morning. And I'm very thank you for inviting me to participate in this meeting. I'm not sure I will satisfy all your answers. For instance, I don't have much to say about Africa and the relationship with the European Union. But of course, I will try to concentrate on the thing which I think is a main challenge right now for the not only European Union or Europe, but whole transatlantic area, which is the conflict between Russia and Ukraine. And let me emphasize once again, conflict between Russia and Ukraine, because sometimes, especially here in Europe, there is a very popular Russian saying that this is a Ukrainian crisis. No, this is a conflict between Russia and Ukraine, which was initiated by Russia by annexation of Crimea and thereby initiating the rebellion in Donbass. I think that I do not have to remind the participant in the panel, but because this is the open panel for the viewers, so let's remind the others that Mr. Putin some years ago mentioned that the collapse of the Soviet Union was the biggest tragedy in the history of the world and in the history of Russia. That means that Putin is trying for those which is left over from the Soviet Union for the Russian Federation to recreate the status of the former Soviet Union. To do this, he needs to, of course, bring back some former Soviet Union republics like Belarus, like Ukraine, like Kazakhstan. Those are the biggest one. And his maximum plan, or plan A, is to come back to the situation 1960s, 70s, 80s, that the whole world was ruled by the Dyad, United States and Soviet Union. And those who are old enough, they remember that the whole world was waiting from one summit to other summit, from Helsinki to Reykjavik, from Reykjavik to Geneva, and so on and so forth. So he would like to come back to this situation that the whole world was ruled by two superpowers. So for this reason, he needs to reunite some territories which were lost by the Soviet Union. It's a difficult task. Of course, it's a possible task, but probably will not be implemented to such an extent he is dreaming of. It will be very difficult to recreate, the Soviet Union. So he's got the plan B, also plan minimum, to strengthen the power of Russia as much as possible and recreate something which historian knows as a concert of powers, which was ruling the world in 19th century. And he is much closer to this situation. Although recent American administration of President Biden allow him to dream about the recreation of Plan A, because Biden offered him a special possibility to keep the dialogue with the White House, and offered him several concessions, especially in the area of arms control, very, I would say, lucrative for contemporary Russia. So the conflict between Russia and Ukraine is not only about grabbing some territory or changing the regime, so to speak, in Kiev, but this is a conflict, this is a part of the bigger picture to rewrite the security architecture of the transatlantic area, or the bigger area from Vancouver to Vladivostok, and turn back the time. I mentioned about Putin. Let me mention also about Mr. Ryabkov, who was very outspoken, the Deputy Minister of Foreign Affairs. A few weeks ago, he mentioned that the security architecture in the transatlantic area is supposed to be back to 1997. Let me remind you that the enlargement of NATO started in 1999, 2 years later. So he wants actually not only to change the deployment of the NATO troops, but also change the accession, change the membership of some countries in the European Union and in NATO. This is unacceptable, of course. We cannot violate the principles which were organized, created, and we stick to them for the last 30 years. First of all, NATO is keeping the doors open. So we cannot promise Mr. Putin that NATO sooner or later shut the door, will not be offering membership to other countries. The second principle is that each country in Europe has a possibility, has a right to choose its own way of development. Those who are democratic, they can choose the domestic way of development, but those who are not democratic, like Belarus, of course, they do not have this possibility. But of course, all other countries, they have a possibility to choose their own path of alliances. And the third, I would say, principle, this is OSCE principle, for instance, that we do not accept any kind of special zones, zones of special influence near abroad, or things like that. Everything what Putin, Ryabkov, and others want is to violate all these principles and to promise to give the guarantees to Russia that we'll come back and turn the time to 1990s. This is unacceptable. Now, coming back to the conflict between Russia and Ukraine, how we can stop, how we can de-escalate, or how we can, let's be more ambitious, how we can stop Russian aggression. And I propose 3 steps. First one is to deprive Russians funds for making this aggressive policy possible. They are making mostly money selling raw materials, especially gas and oil. If we stop them possibility to export, especially gas, large abundance, large quantity of gas, especially to Western Europe, we will deprive them the possibility to accumulate resources to develop a huge military might. But speaking about the sanctions, we cannot stop only on Nord Stream 1, Nord Stream 2, things like that. We have to think about SWIFT, expel them from the financial deals based on dollar. But also I would suggest that sanctions supposed to reach to the Russian celebrities. We have to impose sanctions on those people in Russia who support Putin's imperialistic policy and who make a living on this. I cannot accept situation that young Russian boys are fighting Ukrainians and Donbass, and at the same time, other young Russian boys from Spartak Moscow, for instance, they play football on Allianz Arena in Munich or Stade de France in Paris. They're supposed to be excluded. I cannot accept situation that Bolshoi Theater is performing in Paris. At the same time, the other Russians are occupying Crimea and thinking how to grab another piece of Ukraine. I cannot accept the situation that Russian specialists, scientists are enjoying life in Stanford, Oxford, and other facilities, so we can deprive them also the possibility to get access to the Western, I would say, scientific institutions. So this is about the sanction. The second step to stop aggression is to reinforce the presence of NATO and American troops in something which is called NATO and European Union Eastern flank. Not to fight Russians, but to deter Russians. The more troops we have, the more Russia will be scared to embrace any kind of military incident. And the third step, the last one, is to allow Ukrainians to defend themselves, actually. So we have to help them, we have to assist them, not only to modernize the country, to be ready to join in future NATO or European Union, but to be ready right now to defend themselves against escalation of Russian aggression. So we have to allow those who has such a possibility to sell them, to deliver them defensive weapons like anti-tanks, anti-craft, anti-plane, anti-aircraft, and something like that. So we have to make the Ukrainian army effective to defend their own territory. We cannot forget, for instance, although this is completely different situation, but I remember that in 1930s, for instance, in the domestic conflict in Spain, also most Europe decided not to provide the weapon for the republics, but the others were providing weapons for fascists in Spain. So legitimate government who won legitimate way democratic election in Kiev supposed to be supported by international community and has a right, supposed to has a right to defend themselves. So those three steps: sanction, deterrence, and assistance for Ukrainian to allow them to defend themselves. So I think I exhausted my time, so thank you very much.
Thank you very much. That was extremely interesting and perfect timing. I will now give the floor to our second speaker, so Dick Roche. As an opening question, maybe I could start. Maybe heads of state have recently highlighted the need for a stronger Europe. In your view, will 2022 be your turning point for European strategic autonomy?
I was completely engrossed with the previous speaker. And I think it's very valuable. His contribution is very valuable because sitting as I am out here in the Atlantic, it's very hard to take the same view. And it's really interesting to have that insight. Europe is there is no doubt about it. Europe is at a very challenging position right now. The crisis which has arisen because of interference with Ukraine, it is a real challenge to us. I was very struck by something President Macron said on the 9th of December when he was talking about the evolving pressures. He said, history is back and tragedy too. And our big challenge now is to make sure that we learn from history, that we do not find ourselves landed in a war, a real war, or a hybrid war. My personal view is that the risks at the moment are high and rising, but it's not inevitable, I think, that there will be an attack on Ukraine. I think it's terribly important that we not be overly alarmist. I think that the US and certainly the UK language in recent days seems alarmist. Kiev has had a more cautious approach, and I think there's a different read from France and in Germany. There is a real irony, of course, to where we are talking about Europe and the role of Europe. Again, going back to Macron, he made the point that the whole Balkan area is that their future is Europe and in Europe, and Europe has to work very closely to make that the case. The real irony at the moment, however, is Europe is really not a player. Europe, in the sense of the European Union, and we need to be aware of that. There was an interesting point made by Antony Blinken in recent days when he spoke about Ukraine's future as being as being dependent on a democratic and a European path. So that was a good sign. I personally am very concerned at the dissonance and the divisions that we have at the moment. I notice, for example, I read a lot of American material every day. I notice that there's a very hostile attitude towards the German or the French approach in this. And I think whatever our differences, we should try and keep them between ourselves and not have them broadcast, because divergent views, open hostility, divisions would be joy, music to the ears of Mr. Putin and people who want to play on our differences. So how do we look forward? I'm not sure about sanctions, and there's a number of reasons why I say that. First of all, I actually think that Russia has planned very carefully for where it is. The Russian economy has been tanked for some years, and their markets have tanked. I also believe, and there was a comment, I think, yesterday in The Guardian about this, that Russia seems to have amassed a very significant cash stockpile in preparation for sanctions. So they may be able to weather sanctions more than we have factored into these discussions. And the third point, I think, is that Russia has very much factored the asymmetric leverage that it has available to it from the point of view of energy in particular into its calculations. I'm not sure if Russia were to turn off the gas in any time soon. It would certainly hurt Russia, but it would do an awful lot of damage in Europe, particularly in a cold winter. And they may be able to withstand the problems that would arrive quicker than we could. I think they're also counting, and certainly part of the, I've no doubt, part of the arithmetic in Moscow has been the disunity and the distractions that have been a feature of Europe for the last while. Going back to President Macron, he said that the key part of resolving the pressures, particularly for the Western Balkans and for the Ukraine, is to actually help to build on, to help them to build on their European future, to recognize that they are Europe, they are part of Europe, their future is in Europe. Now that all speaks to the wider issue, and that is the question of European sovereignty. And what is European sovereignty? And what do we mean by European sovereignty? I believe Europe needs to be far more coherent in its policies, and I think it needs to have a clear view as to its sovereignty. My personal view is I'm very close to the United States. I always have been. Everybody in Ireland is very close to the United States. I think that while the United States is our greatest friend, it is also a friend that can do us a lot of damage. We need to see the world through European eyes. We don't necessarily need always to be dancing to the tune of Washington. So we need to be careful that we do not become a pawn in the game. And going back, and of course, Mr. Kanofsky was absolutely correct. Anybody of our age group well remembers the Cold War years and well remembers this world, this bipolar world where there were two superpowers and they were playing a game and we were the ping pong ball on the table. And I think that was never healthy, never ever healthy. And I wouldn't like to get back to that position. I actually do think that we have to recognize that the Russians have a viewpoint too. You can be shot for saying this nowadays. A vice admiral in Germany got into a lot of trouble for talking about respect. But you know, in politics, in political life, I always found it very important to respect my opponents, to respect my enemies, to respect that they have a viewpoint which may be different than my viewpoint, to respect that their take on history might be different than my viewpoint. And the greatest thing we can do in Europe, in the European Union, is build a strong union, is be united, is avoid the kind of distractions that we're seeing at the moment. The commentariat in the older Western European EU member states, their attacks on other countries, on some of the more new members, on Poland, on Hungary. Countries in Europe have sovereign views, and we should all respect that. So I think we need to build a European sovereignty. And the first thing we need to do is build more respect within Europe for the differences that we have. We need to also, I think, work very hard to creating a situation where we can understand those who are outside our way of thinking. What happens in Russia, what happens in China, and of course, what happens in the United States. So we're in a complex position. I think on the positive side, I hope, I pray that we're not going to see a situation where young men and young women will be slaughtered because of political ideology. I think that, that is such a medieval way of dealing with the problems. But I feel very passionately that the future for this continent is a strong Europe, a sovereign Europe, a Europe which takes its place in the world, and a Europe which is a force for good, that we're not there as some sort of post-colonial view of ourselves, that we want to assist, we want to help our neighbors. It's a pity we're not talking about Africa, but I was really much taken by what Macron said about Africa. Europe has a huge moral debt the problems in Africa were caused by European colonialism. And we have to stand up, recognize that, and not in some post-colonial way, but in recognizing our moral responsibility, help to build a democratic, a dynamic, an economic progressive Africa. Just to mention that the other issue, which is mentioned in the leaflet, is China and where we go with China. The reality again is the same, that we're not going to make any progress by isolating another large country, particularly not in a country like that. We have to establish a dialogue, a relationship. We also have to remember when we're dealing with China, that Europe has done far more damage and inflicted more harm on China than China ever inflicted on Europe. So we have a whole series of issues that we have to deal with in the context of the crisis in Ukraine. The very best job that Europe can do at the moment is to actually sit together, talk together, have a coherent strategic way of dealing with it in the short, the medium, and the long term. And certainly in the case of Ukraine, helping Ukraine to see and helping the people in Ukraine who believe that not only are they part of Europe, but we see them as part of Europe, and we see their sovereignty as important to us as our sovereignty is to us.
Thank you very much, Mr. Roach. That was very interesting, and I think that we'll now give the floor to Ambassador Delcourt. And the question I had prepared were prolong this conversation, I think. So if you could tell us a bit what you think about how can the EU best tackle both internal and external threats to its multilateralism. But of course, the conversation is going so well, you're very free to prolong these questions. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Well, I would say at the outset that for many years, the European Union has been strongly invested in defending, advocating the liberal international order. And many of its core approaches to security have been heavily dependent upon it. I'd like to remind that in 2003, Javier Solana, who was then the High Representative of the European Union for Foreign Affairs, produced a European security strategy, which advocated the principle of effective multilateralism to be the guiding tenet of EU foreign policy. And this became really the, if you like, the core element, which was, or the main engine of the EU foreign policy for a while. And this was kind of reconfirmed by another important paper I like to refer to, which is the 2016 Global Strategy. And I want to quote here this document, which was produced by Mrs. Mogherini. Quote, the EU will promote a rules-based global order with multilateralism as its key principle, and the United Nations has at its core, unquote. So at the end of her term, the EU High Representative Mogherini in 2019 insisted that the EU support for the multilateral order was stronger than ever. And she listed some very important achievement, if you like, in terms of the support that EU gave to climate change negotiation, the agreement on the 2015 agreement on the nuclear, on Iran's nuclear capabilities, which I personally believe is probably one of the most, if not the most impressive diplomatic achievement of the EU until today. Arm control treaties, the involvement of the EU in the WTO was quite substantial. So, and therefore, the EU has had a new strategic agenda based on, and that's the key word which you would see everywhere, a rule-based international order. Now, are we still today in 2022 following the same line? Yes and no. There is a shift. There is something new happening, including in the rhetoric of the new High Representative Josep Borrell. Borrell has explained, and I want to quote that because this is again very interesting, we're going to act multilaterally if we can, autonomously if we must. So this notion of strategic autonomy has gained prominence, mainly as a prompt defense and security capacities, separate from multilateral operation. So we are kind of shifting gradually from the effective multilateralism of Solana to a kind of post-multilateralist order. And I'm ready to, this is my approach, and I'm ready to open that for discussion, of course. But again, what the word geopolitical mean? What does it mean when the president of the Commission advocates that the EU should be more geopolitical? What does that mean? How do you understand the sentence by former Chancellor Merkel arguing that the EU need to reposition itself strategically? When the Dutch Prime Minister Mark Rutte argued that, and I'm quoting again, the EU needs a reality check. Interesting. The EU needs a reality check. Power is not a dirty word. Realpolitik must be an essential part of Europe's foreign policy toolkit, unquote. So you understand that there is a shift, and we are at the beginning of this shift. The EU's new tone internationally was probably also related to its own difficulties. We had the Brexit, we had some illiberal drift among some EU member states. We had to go through a difficult financial crisis. All this has, of course, affected our posture in the EU. And so, where do we stand now? And I will kind of conclude with this. Well, allow me to produce here a kind of a qualification which I would mention as smart multilateralism. Like the Americans are speaking of smart power. It is a kind of a new balance between flexibility and inclusivity. So we know that we would not really be able to gain a wide support for all the principles we are defending. So we are kind of developing a different approach, which I will call minilateral, not multilateral, but minilateral. The coalition of the willings, if you like, on cybersecurity, on China, on Russia, on India. And this is, if you like, multilateralism à la carte a little bit, a variable geometry of the new EU diplomacy. Probably the COVID-19 pandemic has also had an impact on this because of the, initial difficulty we're facing in terms of coordinating our health policies. But for all those reasons, and I conclude with this, and I hope this will lead to a debate with those who are listening to us. The EU commitment to liberal international order, well, has in some way become more distinctive, as some other powers have stepped back from defending that order. Yet, Europeans have also moved towards a more instrumental approach to global norms in line with other countries around the world. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ambassador. That was very interesting, and I'm sure we'll get some questions from our audience later on that will transfer to you. Lastly, Ambassador Yardim, I will give the floor to you now. And if we could talk a little bit about the challenges rising from the Middle East as well, and how can the EU and Turkey work together to face these threats, that would be great. Thank you. You have the floor.
Thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be with you and with colleagues from different countries. Of course, Ms. Elena, since the topic is foreign policy challenges for European Union 2022, I am a bit outsider, although from a candidate country, but also some of my wordings will be as an outsider, of course, from the inside of EU. What I will be saying might not be very fitting to insiders' thought and approaches. So this is something normal. So as my introductory words before coming to Turkey, European Union, a sort of relations with respect to 2022, I would like to say a few words about Ukraine, which is a dominant topic of today and for the years, not only 2022, but for the years ahead. It is my belief. Of course, West, not only European Union, NATO or countries as individual parties to this issue vis-a-vis Russia, is much more organized. This is how I see. Of course, there are some deficiencies which we see from outside as well. But if I compare the issue like 2014 Crimean annexation or the issue Russia's annexation of half of the Georgian neighborhood, I find it today vis-a-vis Russia, the West with all parties are in a much more organized situation, and they are really showing their muscles. Of course, what I am saying is not that Russia is in a weaker position in comparison to these years, but at the end of the day, NATO or European Union or some other parties are not turning their eyes closed to what's going on in Ukraine. So, arising from this point of view, my final analysis will be is that I don't give a chance, of course, as a human, it will be devastation for everybody, that there will be a major clash or major a sort of warlike situation, hopefully, wishfully, during the 2022 and forward on this issue regarding Ukraine. But of course, the environment always changes. There are always probabilities. But at the moment, given circumstances, this is how I see the developments. But of course, when we are evaluating Russia's view of Ukraine, I think we have to, I generally make a sort of differentiation between what Mr. Putin or Russian deep state or Russian intellectuals had seen the disintegration of Soviet Union. Most probably, what they meant with regards to Ukraine plus Belarus is different than what they were thinking about Caucasia or Baltics or Central Asia. I am in the belief that Russia, Moscow was very much aware that they will not be able to control disintegration of Soviet Union with respect to Baltics, Caucasus, and even Central Asia to a certain limit. But how they see Ukraine and Belarus is their final point. Because any Russian intellectual not only is a matter of Putin or deep Russian state, Ukraine and Belarus are almost, of course it's questionable, but almost the same world together with Russian Federation. So Russia is also showing its muscles. The West is also better organized than 2014. So they will find a midway. What will be? Of course, I am not a politician, but this week we will be waiting. I will be waiting the response of NATO plus United States vis-a-vis the proposals of Russia. So Ukraine in this context will be a really challenge, not only 2022, but for the future years ahead. This is how I see. Maybe they will find a sort of balancing way, but of course we are not in a position, we will never accept that Russia can propose that either Ukraine or any nation globally cannot become a member of NATO is something which is never possible to accept. So Russia will have to understand. So having said this, let's turn to our major topic of today, which is EU challenges for foreign policy for European Union for the year 2022. Again, as an outsider, from a candidate country, I would like to underline that I see, Ms. Elena, rather than the regions or items or topics, I would like to focus on coherence and unity as the most important and major challenges for European Union, again, for the coming decades, not only for 2002. What I mean, we have an example, which is it currently Ukrainian example. In the past week, for instance, Kazakhstan, or let's take the issue of China. How is it going on relations? I will share some of my thoughts, for instance, with respect to China in a few words. But so it is really difficult to see a very unity and coherent policy on these really very vital issues. Of course, I don't know. I mean, how is it discussed within EU circles, let's say the Ukrainian issue? But sometimes I feel that even Ukrainian leadership is felt a sort of betrayed because of some approaches of lacking coherence and unity. I don't want to name any country or state, but for instance, the position of Germany or the position of Poland, countries, EU members bordering the European Union, I regret to see that they are really differentiating. And this is the issue which Mr. Putin thinks will be the most important gain from this crisis. Mr. Putin or Russia or Moscow or Russian deep state, for my understanding, they are very much aware that they cannot invade. There will not be a concept of invading Ukraine. But once they see that different views which are not discussed inside the doors, but openly discussed, openly shared with the global community and openly broadcasted through social media with respect to Ukraine divergence, I think psychologically Mr. Putin thinks this is his greatest gain from this crisis. This is not something new. Even in the last NATO summit, 14 June, Brussels NATO summit, when we look at the final declaration or new vision declaration 2033, the main focus was keeping NATO intact, more disciplined NATO intact, and unity and growing sense of transatlantic relations. So I think they were referring to such kind of issues. Divergence inside, but totally united coherence towards outside. So this is it. So then we come to, I would like, while passing, but please, Ms. Elena, please inform me when I have a time limit, so I will stop. Let's talk about a few words about Turkey and European Union, because in addition to issues like unity and coherence within European Union, Turkish-European relations is also a very challenging topic for European and also for Turkey. for 2022, also for the future, especially in foreign policy issues, of course. In this sense, I would like to share a keyword, which is normalization. We can talk about a lot of issues concerning Turkey and European Union, especially on foreign policy issues. But the general framework should be normalization, because currently, Turkish-European relations are frozen. It is in the deep refrigerator. There are no high-level visits. Of course, last April, there was a visit by Commissioner von der Leyen and Mr. Charles Michel. But of course, what I am sharing is that is a sort of high-level visits to share vision, to share dialogue, not to focus on some specific issues. So there are no new chapters. It's almost frozen. Especially, these are not secret. European side make it very clear. Unless some conditions are met, there are no chapters new, either closed or discussed, whatever it is. So my feeling is that in order to evaluate what Turkey can contribute or what cannot contribute to general EU framework on foreign policy, of course, including security and defense, the key word must be the normalization. Under these circumstances where our relations are frozen, it is really not much very realistic to have a different of views with respect to visionary future. I always believe, as we have reflected in our party, because I am a party member also, we have always reflected in our party program that our relations with European Union is strategic. We keep the strategic aim of membership as a target. Of course, it is not a near future. We have to be realistic, but it is our own agenda. So we will be stick to this issue. We are ready as Turkey, especially our party, I have to say, because I cannot talk in behalf of my government, because there are some issues which we are radically different from each other. Robert Schuman has a really very important wording, which says Europe needs a soul and ideal and a political will to serve this ideal. I do believe that given normalization of Turkish-European relations, Turkey may have a lot of contributions in his field. When I look at some resolutions, documents, or policy papers of European Union leaders with respect to policy, foreign policy issues, really, I always find and subscribe myself to those wordings, because what they are mentioning, Ms. Elena, are also the topics which are mattering to Turkey, from Latin America to Africa, China, Russia, Ukraine, Middle East, because we have to know that new Turkey, Turkey, in comparison to the 60s, 70s, or beginning of 2000, the first years of current government, we do not limit our foreign policy vision to only classical areas of interest, like not Middle East, not Balkans. As a Turkish diplomat, I am very happy to share that after having served so many years in Turkish diplomacy, our interest is Latin America, Africa, Eurasia, Balkans, global, all issues, of course, within the realistic limitations of our economy and power. This is something else. Turkey and Europe can do a lot. For instance, one question may be refugee issue, which you have already. I know the hindrances, I know the obstacles, and I know the current picture of today. But in any case, 18 March 2016 agreement or statement was really a success. We had, both parties, NATO, everybody had vessels, ships, gendarmerie in the region. But what they couldn't do, because daily, monthly or annually, there were thousands of refugees being drowning in the sea, in the Aegean or Middle East. But a 3-page document of 18 March had really succeeded bringing those numbers into a almost nil or single digit. So it's really a success. But of course, it should be coordinated with some other aspects of the agreement, like visa regulation, modernization of customs union. This is something separate, part of the picture. But in any case, migration, refugee issue is something we can do together, again, given the normalization of our mutual relations. Middle East is always one area of, last minute. Okay, so I conclude with saying, in the past, we have a lot of opportunities, Turkey and Europe, to share our expertise, like European Union Gendarmerie in Bosnia, European Union police mission again in Bosnia, or EU missions, Concordia, Proxia, Altia. So we had an experience. Both parties are not unexperienced partners with respect to security and foreign policy dimension of cooperation. But first, let's focus on how to settle our relations towards normalization with a new vision. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ambassador. Thank you for that keyword that would, I think, mark your intervention. Thank you. I will now open the floor for Q&A, which is also an opportunity for you, of course. Maybe at the start, if you want to bring back some points that each of you raised, I will open the floor to that first. Thank you. I do have a first question for Mr. Waszczykowski. If I could come back to one point. I've read recently a lot about the EU strategy. I think the 3 keywords were push back, contain, and engage that have been kind of put to the forefront of the EU strategy towards Russia. Do you think that is still relevant, or do you think that is something that could evolve with the current situation? Thank you.
Well, it's a very nicely taken rhetoric, but I don't see this strategy to be implemented. Actually, we heard in the last 2 weeks Joseph Borrell, who participated in the AFET committee, it's a Committee of Foreign Relations of the European Parliament, and he mentioned openly, European Union is not a security institution. It's not created, not organized to provide security. It's not equipped in an instrument to find a peaceful solution for any military conflict. And so he is not directly involved in any of these activities. Well, it's a departure from the position of the European Union, because for the last 2 years, we heard from Ursula von der Leyen that the European Commission is a geopolitical commission. This commission, and especially this European Parliament, has the ambition to deal with almost everything, not only with the conflict between Russia and Ukraine, not only with the Chinese problem, but also with issues like Venezuela, Mozambique, or the abortion policy of Texas state in the United States. So we have to make up our mind what we are actually as a European Union. Let me refer to my Irish colleague who mentioned several times about the great idea how we're supposed to unite it and work together. Well, let's not be naive. European Union, it's not a club of altruists. It was created some time ago, of course, to get rid of the military instruments, but to allow members to compete among each other. So we faced this strong competition. Till 2009, till financial crisis, of course, we were naive and we were informed that European Union is a special creature which thinks about the common things, things like this. Since 2009, we see completely different European institutions, where we see suddenly that member states, they have their own national agenda, national interests, and they compete with each other like hell. Right now, I think that we witness another process, which officially is called federalization of the European Union, but actually is a process of getting hegemony by Germany. And to create the union, which is similar to Empire of Charlemagne, which was created in the 8th, 9th century after Christ. This is a dangerous situation because that means that the European Union will be ruled by the biggest country and institutions will take care of the interests of the bigger country or the biggest country. We wouldn't object federalization, but the problem is that in the European Union we do not have democratic criteria how to elect or select central authority which is going to rule the whole institutions, and at the same time to take care of the interests of all the countries. So far we have institutions like the commissions, like the tribunal, which are overtaken by liberal left majority in the European Union, and they are waging the ideological war with the conservative parties, with conservative government. So it's a kind of a turning point right now in the European Union, which direction will go this institution. Are we going to survive as an institution which is taking care of the economic prosperity, social prosperity of the people of Europe? Are we going to turn these institutions into a political instrument which is going to be governed and ruled by the biggest country of Europe? So we have, unfortunately, outside conflicts at the gates, like Russian, Ukrainian. And if we have such a conflict, we have a burning borders, we cannot start thinking how to build a fire department. It's not time right now to discuss about the strategic autonomy, compass policy, a new strategic document on Mogherini board or something. We have to rely on the tested institutions like NATO, like transatlantic cooperation with the United States, because without the United States, we would have lost World War I, World War II, Cold War, Balkan conflicts. In all these conflicts, we were safe only because they came. The cavalry came from the other border, other part of Atlantic to save Europe. So we have to cooperate with them, not to think about the new artificial institutions right now. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I see that Ambassador Delcourt has mastered the Zoom reaction. So I will give the floor to Ambassador Delcourt, and then I think Mr. Roach, you would like to take the floor too. Perfect.
Yes, thank you. I have a point of order. I'm surprised that this exchange, which was until now rather open, is taken to a more has become politicized by the last speaker. I want to underline that I do not agree with the words which were used to qualify the European Union as an hegemony, as an institution which is going to be transformed into an hegemony by Germany. Neither I see the reconstruction of the empire of the time of Charlemagne, nor I would agree with the qualification of the liberal left influencing the decision of the EU institution. I would therefore ask the coordinator of the of this webinar to bring us back to a more serene exchange. Thank you.
Very well noted, and will do. Dick Roche, you had also raised a hand, so I will give you the floor now, and then we move to other questions. Thank you.
Yes. During my political career, I had to lead 3 separate referendum campaigns on Europe. The referendum campaign on the Nice Treaty, the first and the second referendum campaign on the Lisbon Treaty. And the point was always thrown at me in Ireland because Irish people absolutely, they have an inherent, inbuilt desire to protect their individual sovereignty and the individual sovereignty of this nation. And I can understand well the point that our MEP colleague Wyszynowski has made. I can understand Polish sensitivity. I want to show you, I can if I say, this is a picture which will be well recognized. That picture is the famous photograph of the little boy walking from the Warsaw Ghetto. I got that photograph when I was 12 years of age. And I always had it hanging. I had a copy of it hanging on my office in government buildings. I have a copy of it hanging on my office here at home. Wasn't thinking of this direction or anything. The point is that was Europe then, for all its flaws, for all its many divisions, all its many problems. Europe is a much, much better place now. By pooling small amounts of our sovereignty, we have created something which is absolutely unique. And I think we should value that. But we should also respect the views of other countries. And I am a liberal at heart. I'm former vice president of the ALDE, the Liberal Party. But I sometimes get very, very disturbed about how illiberal liberals are. When I actually hear commentary about Poland or about Hungary from people who I don't think have invested in the history of those countries, I feel very upset. I feel upset for my colleagues in Poland, my colleagues and my friends and my fellow European citizens in Hungary. We're not going to strengthen the European project by pointing accusatory fingers at each other. So we do need to respect the fact that there is a huge diversity of opinion in Europe. And I would certainly not like to see Europe moving away from that respect. I think the point that there were some really interesting points made. I mean, just going back to the issue of Turkey and Turkey being in the waiting room to join Europe for so long. There is, I've always felt, a disrespect towards Turkey. And yet we call on Turkey to deal with difficult issues, such as the issue of the refugees. We're far from perfect in Europe. So we need to, our strength is that we do have dramatic differences. I personally don't see any, I don't see any evidence that we've gone too far in one direction or the other, but we do need to understand that there are sensitivities within the 27 member states. My proudest day in politics was the day of joining back in 2007, when 10 European countries joined the Irish presidency. 2004, when 10 European countries joined with the then EU. And I remember standing beside the then Polish president, who had tears in his eyes in the Phoenix Park, where the Irish presidency has its office, or the Irish president has his home, and celebrating the fact that Europe was coming together. We haven't had enough moments like that. But what we should do now, I think, is see that the threat from the threat to another European country gives us an opportunity to express to the world what we as Europeans stand for. We're for peace, we're for progress, we're for respect for other countries. We don't want to be a superpower, but we also don't want to be a ping pong ball for any superpower. So I think that's why I celebrated much of what President Macron had to say, and I wrote about it recently, that it seemed to me that most presidency programs nowadays they articulate an administrative and a bureaucratic timetable. I think he was trying to say there's a different role for Europe to play, and I think we should look at that. But most importantly, I think we need to stop finger pointing in Europe. I think we need to respect the fact that there are 27 sovereign nations, each with their own history, and that we have to respect that there are differences amongst us as well as common objectives.
Thank you. I see being raised from Ambassador Yardim and Mr. Waszczykowski. Just to
can I just briefly say, because I have to apologize because I have another assignment. I have to say goodbye because I have another thing to do. I'm sorry. I thought that will last about 1 hour. But I just want to say briefly that I'm very surprised by the comments of my Belgian colleague, because this is not a scientific seminar. This is a discussion among the politicians. I'm connected with you from European Parliament, which is this is a nest of 700 politicians. So the appeal not to politicize debate, it's a bizarre. We are talking about the European Union, which is a politically oriented institution, where is the arena of live political debates and this kind of claims that we're supposed to turn away from politics. It's strange. But thank you very much for having me. I would like to come back maybe sometimes if you try to organize this similar debate, but I have to come back to other duties. I'm very sorry that the Parliament is working all the time. So thank you guys, all the best. It was great to participate. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Back to give the floor back to Ambassador Delcourt right afterwards. But so I'll proceed with my question for Ambassador Yardim, who hasn't spoken in a while, to bridge to what Mr. Roche was saying. I was very interested in what you said about normalization, and I'm wondering if you could maybe give us a bit more details of how this could actually take shape in the short-term future, this normalization. Thank you.
Of course, I will return back to your question in a few minutes, but when I had seen your policy paper that you have extended to us, as I said, as a topic, major foreign policy changes in 2022, there is one paragraph, EU's relationship with China. So I would like to share a few sentences so that I will be in the framework of your topic. Of course, I am not very much aware of if European Union has a very well-structured, unitarian and coherent policy vis-à-vis China. This I don't know the details, but I know the interest. I know the bilateral relations of EU member states with China. This is something else. But I sometimes see that there are some elements which may differ as far as the bilateral members are concerned vis-à-vis China. But in any case, in the framework of Turkish-European relations is concerned with respect to China, I can certainly say that as an opposition party in Turkish politics, we don't share the policy guidelines of our government in Turkey. There are some major differences, especially in the case of Uyghur case, humanitarian issues. But on the other hand, of course, developing relations with China on economy, tourism, or other fields are essential for Turkey as much as for European Union. And we reflected as China an important partner for Turkey as a future party. So this is something else. But In this case, I would like to share my appreciation, let's say some statements by European Parliament or some European Union bodies, sanctions, which are targeting some high-level Chinese leaders, political figures, with respect to their unhumanitarian approaches, which they are applying against Uyghurs in East Turkestan or Xinjiang, I have to share. And in Turkey, we are one of the leading parties, maybe number one leading party, to share our concern on the issue, to talk in different fora, domestic and international. So this is it. And of course, my thanks go to European Union Parliament, which they have approved in the Hong Kong resolution last week, calling for a diplomatic boycott to Beijing Winter Olympics. But I see that it is not shared with all member states of the European Union. It's something different. And another question in your framework of policy challenges in 2020 was that I am supposed to touch Turkey S-400 issues, Turkey's security relations with Russia. A few words. My point is that, Ms. Elena, Turkey and Russia does not and cannot have strategic defense and security relations. It's not possible. So the context is, I would like to tie up to normalization. It's a sort of reactionary relations. Once Turkey's relations are going bad with European Union or not even NATO sometimes is discussed, or United States, which I am referring non-normalization of issues, then there is a sort of reactionary policies which Turkey's government tries to place itself closer to Russia or China, but this is not normal. So this is against the nature of Turkish position as an ally in Western alliances, including NATO. So returning back to my rhetoric, once we see the normalization of Turkey-European relations through so many channels which are frozen, revitalization of these channels, then we will see how quickly, how speedily the Turkish-Russian relations are coming back to status which they are supposed to be. So today it is abnormal. In this case, we are very much critical of S-400 issues as well. Once such normal relations took place between Turkey and some European institutions, I think the best way is to throw these S-400s into a trash if there is no other better alternative. So this is just a temporary transition period. So now nobody should think that it is part of a very strategic, high-level, visionary relation between Turkey and Russia. This is impossible. Of course, we value highly, like China, Turkish-Russian relations. It's a neighborhood. Economy, tourism, trade, infrastructure. We should have relations in energy, just like Germany and Russia. But in the level of defense, security, such that Turkey's place is not to be sidelined with Russia. So this is we are very much critical of S-400 policy of Turkey, and I am happy to share, although I am a part of the opposition, this issue, the wrong issue of the wrong guided nature of this issue is gradually and slowly being understood by both Ankara and Washington. Unluckily, it's a very slow progress, but on the final process, S-400s will go to trash and there is no other way out. Now, coming to your question, Ms. Elena, the nature of Turkish-European relations are really so many channels. For instance, in some channels, in secondary channels perhaps, they are moving on. For instance, what? Dialogue channels on security and defense issues. There are non-official talks are going on. A few months ago, they had it with EESA in Brussels. So such kind of relations are going. Immigration issue, it is also going on. All the channels are not closed. But what I am referring is that there is a total lack of visionary perspective in both parties to carry our relations into a future. It is true, for instance, our parliamentary relations are almost cut since 2017 or 18. I mean, this is unacceptable. I mean, I don't want to put the blame on EU or Turkey, but the reality is that there is a lack of leadership with visionary prospects. The parliaments are not meeting together. There are no high-level visits, mutual visits. So, both parties have questions vis-a-vis each other, but there is much to do following our normalization. Then we will talk about a lot of issues, including foreign policy, about what to do. This is it.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Yes, we're getting closer to the end. So I would like to give the floor maybe one more time to Ambassador Delcourt. I do have one more question. I was very interested in what you said with the coalitions of the willing. It's something that we've heard a lot over the last few, I was going to say years, but maybe months. Could you develop a bit more about that and about how the coherence, especially in EU defense, could come from from the core of a coalition of the willing? Thank you.
Thank you. Yes. The perception of the EU defense varies a lot among EU partners. And it was obvious from the beginning that you would need a group of countries which would kind of move faster than the others in order to create something that we would call the Europe of the defense, although we understand that we are not completely yet there. We are able to coordinate some operation out of the EU in cooperation with the UN and in the framework of the peacekeeping operation, but the defense of the EU requires an engine, and I understand that we are divided into mainly two groups. The ones we believe that the only possible defense of the EU is and will remain the NATO, actually, and we do not need to duplicate some kind of European defense. They speak of a EU pillar among the NATO, within the NATO, and they would limit themselves to that. And then you have another group in which I place Belgium, France, Germany to some extent, Italy, which consider that the EU has come to a turning point in terms of defining its strategic compass. You know that this concept now has been presented and will be developed under the French presidency. There will be actually a EU ministerial meeting, a EU council dedicated to the EU defense in the coming weeks. Let's not hope for miracles, but we have among our partners countries which have still, like Ireland or Austria, a very strong, I would say, neutral identity, and would therefore not be able to join any sort of defense alliance. However, I do believe that a better coordination of the defense industry, the capacity to organize in a very short term a military operation thanks to the deployment of a battle group. We have battle groups existing only on papers, unfortunately, and all this are the ingredients of the EU defense, and I do believe that those countries I've mentioned are part of this coalition of the willing, which can lead the others to this important goal.
Thank you very much, Ambassador. It is close to the time to end our webinar, but if any of you would like to have one more minute as some sort of a closing statement, you're very welcome.
Yeah, well, there's actually so much to say and so little time in which to say it. I actually go to Ambassador Yelen's point about respecting the fact that Turkey has particular positions. I 100% agree. My views for a long time is that Europe's treatment of Turkey has not been kind, and it is certainly not. It does not stand us in any good stead. On the issue that was mentioned a couple of times about China, I first visited China way back in actually 1979. And in the years since, I've been there backwards and forwards, and I advise a very large Chinese company. I think Europe would make a terrible mistake if we follow the sort of Trumpian policy that the previous presidency in the United States put into play. The idea that we should demonize a whole nation. No nation is perfect on anything. Issues. Of course, there are issues on which we all have concerns, but to actually decide that you're going to demonize a whole nation or to use some of its economic achievements as a negative lever, I think is not a good way for Europe to go. I think we have to learn better that we don't have all the solutions in Europe. Sometimes we project ourselves as if we thought we knew all the answers. We don't. Sometimes we are some of the big, we have actually caused a lot of the problems in the world. We have a moral responsibility towards Africa, which unfortunately we didn't have time to discuss. But I also think that going back to the point I came in to make, I have a sympathy for the point that that Ambassador Yarlin was making. I think Europe, I think it is I wasn't aware of the dearth, the drop off in high level contacts. It would be sensible from everybody's point of view if, for example, parliamentary contacts with Turkey were established. Yes, there would be cases where we differ, but sure, if we're friends, we should respect each other and we should respect ourselves enough to differ with respect. And sure, sometimes when we do differ, if we meet and we debate and we discuss, we meet some middle ground. So I think that was a very important point that the ambassador made, and it's certainly a point I would actually support. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ambassador Yardim, for a closing statement.
Thank you. I was planning to share my thanks for this really interesting and excellent conversation which you have been moderating. I am thankful to Mr. Ebu Bekir Işık and to you, Ms. Elena, and as well as my colleagues from Ireland, Belgium, and Poland, and hope to see you on other occasions as well. Thank you very much for everything.
Thank you very much to all of you three and Mr. Waszczykowski, who left a bit before, but that was a very lively and interesting debate. There was a lot to talk about, not enough time, I'm aware, but I think our audience will be very thrilled to watch it live and maybe to rewatch it later. Thanks to all of you. We hope to see you soon at Vocal Europe for another webinar, interview, anything in the sort. I thank for our audience for watching, and you can find the link soon to rewatch it later. I thank you very much, and everyone have a good afternoon and a good day.